Epic Games has been hit with a number of lawsuits at this point over several of the emotes featured in its free-to-play battle royale game Fortnite. But the latest person to accuse Epic Games of using their likeness as dance moves without permission is taking a slightly different legal approach. According to The Verge, the musician Leo Pellegrino has filed a lawsuit against Epic Games that accuses the company of misappropriating his likeness for the game's Fortnite emote. Pellegrino is represented by the same law firm, representing many of the other artists that have taken an equal step at Epic Games since Fortnite rose to popularity. While those past cases focused on copyright infringement over the use of certain dance moves, Pellegrino is arguing that Epic's use of his trademark moves that have become inseparable from his persona and his life story makes this a case of using his likeness without permission, a compensation rather than copyright infringement. As The Verge points out, it's likely a legal strategy intended to get around some of the roadblocks faced by the murky business of copywriting dance moves that have held up similar cases filed by Alfonso Ribeiro, Tomili, and others. In 2018, I experienced one of my biggest shifts in video gaming behavior over the past decade. Overall, the industry is going through some interesting changes with the introduction of Epic and Discord's game marketplaces, and an explosion of games available on Steam and no storefronts. Personally, it was a big change of me, because I moved in with my fiancé, got married, and overall had less time for my old gaming habits. Instead of playing mostly new games, I have played a mix of new and old games over the past year. Here are some of the trends in my gameplay habits that I noticed in 2018. I started working for Zynga in June, and shortly before then I started exploring mobile games, such as Words with Friends 2. My commute also changed over the past year, and I have more time commuting on the train that I can now spend playing games. One of the genres that I have kept on my phone throughout the year is match-3 titles, including Crazy Cake Swamp, Wonka's World of Candy, and Candy Crush Friends Saga. This is the first year that I really got into mobile gaming, and I have even started playing some of these games outside of my commute. Another trend in my gaming habits that I have noticed in the past year is playing games on easier modes. Since I have less time to play games, I want to get through games quicker, rather than constantly replaying sections of a game. I found myself setting the difficulty level on Wolfenstein 2 to easy mode, so that I could make progress through the game more quickly. I still enjoy challenge in games, but like the ability to take shortcuts to progress the story. Procedural content generation (POP) has already seen huge success with level generation in Minecraft and weapon creation in Borderlands. But this year was the first time that I experienced a game using POP, creating high-fidelity 3D levels. I started playing the Descenders game preview on X1, and really enjoyed the feel of the generated levels. While the early game levels became repetitive after a bit, the later zones in the game added enough terrain configurations to keep the levels diverse and interesting. I'd also tried out some new genres of games this year, including Gone Home. This game has been out for a while, but I finally took the time to play it after downloading it when it was offered through X Live. I enjoyed the pace of the game and the focus on narrative, and it aligned well with my focus on more casual gameplay experiences. As mentioned with Gone Home, I have purchased fewer games directly over the past year, and have taken advantage of more of the games available through X Live and PS Plus. One of my favorites that I replayed this year was Curse of the Shogun, where I played through the DLC content for the first time. Over the past year, I have kept my number of gaming subscriptions steady, while decreasing my number of video streaming subscriptions. It's been exploring subscription services for a few years, with the Access, Origin Access, and X Game Pass. It's shaping up to be a great service as well. I have also been replaying some of favorite games over the past year. Remastered editions, such as Dark Souls, provided a great nudge to encourage me to revisit these classic titles. Between remastered titles, X-backwards compatibility, and classic console releases, there's several options for going back and enjoying older games. This is a trend in my gameplay habits. It blogged about back in 2015, and it's been great seeing more availability of classic titles. Ben Weber is the principal data scientist at Zynga. With rehiring, Marvel's Spider-Man was a huge undertaking for Insomniac Games, and one that represented the largest game the studio had crafted to date. The size of the game, along with the numerous different enemy factions and a city space that evolved throughout the game, led to a good deal of problems and interesting solutions. Something that gameplay programmer Adam Nunchester dove into during his post-mortem today at the Game Developers Conference. Spider-Man's combat is a fluid myriad of dodges, web slings, and combos, and the team had a couple of helpful tricks up their sleeve to capture that very Spider-Man feeling throughout the game. For aligning Spidey himself with his target, Nunchester says they relied on sync joints and anchors to orientate the two combatants on the fly. Those two sync joints, one on Spider-Man and one on his target, would line up to each other, match up, and allow the animations for the ball to connect. There were a handful of different anchor techniques they used, depending on the situation. He explains. And as a bonus, the team was able to use camera zooms to mask some weirdness that emerged through animations because of how this system worked. However, the system was only set up to handle one-on-one animations, so when the topic of finishing moves, taking out more than one enemy, was mentioned later in development, it did not jive with the established system. Height adjustments also proved to be an issue, but one that the team often had to just roll with. As highlighted in one slide, did you know that most game worlds are not flat? Did you know that most mocap studios are? There are issues you fix and there are issues you roll with. And Nunchester says some of the height differences in combat flows belong to that latter category. We cannot always fix things, he says, as an image of Spider-Man punching toward the kneecaps of an enemy on higher terrain pops up on a screen, and then we just deal with things being off. One of Nunchester's main points throughout the talk was how important iteration is to the development process. I hope it's obvious, but it took quite a few tries to get things that you saw in this presentation to where it is now. Time and time again, Nunchester said the team implemented changes that sought to find the balance between flow and difficulty. This became a system where an attacker token was essentially passed out to different members of an enemy group to control the pace and keep enemies from mobbing Spider-Man all at once, attacking too infrequently. Different actions affect the token's holder and behavior. So if an enemy gets too far from Spider-Man, the token resets to another foe that's already ready for attack. And when a player performs a dodge, there's a momentary enemy idle timer that kicks in to give the player a change to get a few good swings in. However, it was too easy for playtesters to feel like the enemies were scoring cheap hits, So iteration was key to discover the systems that eventually captured that Spider-Man flow. Ranged combat added another layer to that complexity, but they eventually worked out a system that prioritized attacks from on-screen enemies to avoid the feeling of cheapness, and made off-screen enemies take longer to fire ranged weapons in general to give the in-game Spidey sense a fraction of a second longer to alert players of an incoming attack. On top of that, invincibility frames were added to combat animations, so players would not feel like enemies were knocking them out of already executed attacks. The system is not perfect, and there is a fair deal of exceptions that come into play, with deep cancel incoming attacks, unless you repeatedly used them, unless it's a dodge, unless it's in a boss fight. But the version that shipped with the game managed to accomplish combat that avoided having players feel cheated by the in-game mile. The solutions the team eventually used in the final game were not their first attempts, and trial and error worked to getting from the things mentioned in his talk to the features the game itself would eventually ship with. He highlights the importance of facing new problems and finding new solutions to those, rather than just resting on things that have worked in past projects.